Story 1. The Pizza Delivery Nightmare. It was during our school's winter break, the day after Christmas. I had a part-time job at our town's pizza shop, a bustling little place popular with locals. Practically half the kids at my school worked there. Despite being so young, every paycheck made me feel like I had struck gold, so I always volunteered to take extra shifts. That day, I assumed the shop wouldn't be too busy. Most people were probably still recovering from holiday festivities. I couldn't have been more wrong. By dinner time, every indoor seat was filled, and delivery orders were pouring in nonstop. The chaos was exhausting but exhilarating. Around 8 p.m., my manager told me to start taking deliveries. I completed a quick drop-off and returned to pick up another order, a single pizza bound for a house 20 minutes away. The roads were eerily quiet as I drove, a stark contrast to the bustling energy inside the shop. Snow fell gently, illuminated only by streetlights, creating a peaceful, almost surreal atmosphere. For once, I drove the speed limit, enjoying the calm before heading back to the madness of work. When I arrived at the address, I realized it wasn't in a neighborhood. The house sat isolated off the main road, with a long gravel driveway leading up to it. Snow-covered trees surrounded the property, and over the top, Christmas decorations lit up the yard. But something felt off. The driveway hadn't been plowed, and as I parked, I noticed the house itself was pitch dark inside. Not a single light was on. As I approached, I spotted fresh shoe prints in the snow leading up to the porch. Oddly, the tracks didn't end at the front door. Instead, they veered around the side of the house. My stomach tightened, but I brushed off the unease. Maybe the owner had gone around the back for some reason. It wasn't my business. I knocked on the door and waited. The cold bit at my face, and after 30 seconds of silence, I knocked again. The world around me was unnervingly quiet. No voices, no footsteps, just the soft rustle of wind and snow. I double-checked the receipt to ensure I was at the right address and knocked a third time, louder this time. Surely, someone had to be home. The fresh shoe prints in the snow proved it, but no one came to the door. Frustrated and shivering, I knocked one last time, practically rattling the door in its frame. Still nothing. Defeated, I turned back toward my car. As I climbed in and tried to start it, my heart sank. The engine wouldn't turn over. It just stalled over and over again. I cursed under my breath, my hands trembling partly from the cold and partly from a creeping sense of dread. Suddenly, movement caught my eye. I looked up to see a figure standing outside the house. The person was bundled up in heavy winter gear boots, jacket, snow pants. They stood still, watching me, Relieved, I stepped out and called, "Hey, did you order the pizza? I've been knocking for 5 minutes." The figure didn't reply. Instead, they started walking toward me. Their movements were slow, deliberate. Something about their pace made my chest tighten. I scrambled back into my car and locked the doors. My breath fogged up the windows as I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. The operator's calm voice came through just as the figure reached my car window. They leaned in close, their face obscured by the shadows of their hood. "Do you need help?" Their voice was low, almost a growl. Panic surged through me. How would they know my car wasn't working? I stammered into the phone, telling the operator my location and situation. Meanwhile, the person outside began circling my car, their eyes scanning it as if searching for a way in. My heart pounded as I watched them reach into their pocket, their movements growing frantic. When they pulled their hand out empty, their frustration became evident. They slammed a fist against my window, causing me to yelp. Then they turned and ran back toward the house. I could see them disappear around the corner. 2 agonizing minutes passed. I debated whether to stay or make a run for it. Just as I was about to decide, I spotted flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the snow. The figure reappeared, holding something metallic in their hand. They froze when they saw the police car, then bolted into the woods. It turned out the man didn't live there. The real homeowners were out of town for the holidays. The decorations, he'd plugged them in to make it look like someone was home. As for my car, he had tampered with something outside while I was on the porch, ensuring it wouldn't start. I quit doing deliveries after that. Story 2. The Snowy Stranger. It was mid-January, and snow blanketed the town day after day. Thankfully, I worked from home, sparing me from braving the freezing weather except for essential errands. On the worst days, the snow fell in thick sheets, accompanied by gusting wind that stung like needles. One particularly frigid evening, I was stuck in Zoom meetings for hours. My internet connection had been spotty all day, and by 6 p.m., it gave out entirely. Frustrated, I called it quits and decided to unwind. Before settling in, I bundled up and took my dog outside for a quick bathroom break. The cold was brutal, the wind biting through my layers. As I stood there shivering, my eyes caught a figure standing near the road. They weren't moving, just standing there, a dark silhouette against the snow. It was strange, but I didn't linger long enough to dwell on it. I hurried back inside, dried my dog's paws, and curled up on the couch under a blanket. The news droned on in the background, providing some semblance of normalcy. Minutes later, my dog perked up, ears twitching. A low growl rumbled from his throat as he stared at the front door. My stomach tightened. I hadn't opened any curtains, so I couldn't see outside. Curious but uneasy, I approached the door and peeked through the peephole. My heart skipped a beat. A man was pacing back and forth on my front patio. His footprints crisscrossed the snow, evidence that he'd been there for some time. He walked to the side of the house and disappeared from view. My pulse quickened. What was he doing? My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. GPC's warning, winter nights have a way of amplifying silence. The world seems to hold its breath, the snow muffling every sound. That's how it was that evening. My small house cocooned in layers of white. Gracie, my loyal German Shepherd mix, was stretched out on the couch in the living room. She was usually a laid-back dog, but earlier, something had spooked her a low, throaty growl as she stared out the front window. I'd looked too, but all I saw was snow drifting lazily under the street lamp. Maybe it was a stray cat or a shadow. Whatever it was, I brushed it off, thinking no one would be out in this weather. Still, the way Gracie's hackles had risen unsettled me. The hours passed uneventfully, and I began to relax again. It was close to 10 p.m. when I decided to take Gracie out for her last walk of the night. The air was bitterly cold, biting through my coat as we stepped outside. Snowflakes danced in the glow of the porch light. The street was quiet, the houses around me dark, except for the occasional warm glow from a bedroom window. Gracie sniffed the ground cautiously, her ears flicking back and forth. She'd been on edge all evening, and her unease was starting to rub off on me. I hurried her along, eager to get back inside. When we finally returned, I double-checked the locks on the front and back doors, drawing the deadbolts tightly. The snow had a way of making everything feel still and safe, but tonight there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. An uneasy night. By the time I headed upstairs to bed, Gracie seemed more relaxed. She jumped onto her dog bed near the foot of mine, letting out a long sigh as she curled up. I turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow of my bedside lamp, and slid under the covers. It was a perfect night for sleeping quiet, cold, and still. But sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house seemed magnified. The wind outside whistled faintly, and I found myself staring at the ceiling, waiting for what? I didn't know. At some point, I must have drifted off. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke to a low, rumbling growl. It wasn't loud, but it was insistent, the kind of growl Gracie only made when something was wrong. "Gracie?" I whispered, sitting up. She was standing at the bedroom door, her body rigid, her ears pinned back. Her tail was tucked so tightly between her legs that she looked smaller than usual. I froze, my heart pounding as I followed her gaze. She was staring at the doorknob. The room was silent except for the sound of my own breathing. "What is it, girl?" I asked, my voice trembling. Gracie let out a short, sharp bark before growling again, her eyes never leaving the door. A wave of dread washed over me. I swung my legs out of bed and tiptoed toward her, straining to hear anything on the other side of the door. My hand hovered over the doorknob, but I hesitated. Something didn't feel right. Then I heard the faintest sound of movement, like the soft crunch of snow under boots. The turning doorknob, my breath caught in my throat. Someone was outside my bedroom door. I didn't know how they had gotten in, but the realization hit me like ice water. I wasn't alone in the house. Before I could decide what to do, the doorknob began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. My stomach dropped as I watched it twist one way, then the other. Whoever was on the other side was testing it, as if trying to decide whether to push their way in. I grabbed Gracie by the collar, pulling her back. My mind raced. Should I scream? Call for help? Stay quiet. My phone was on the nightstand, but I'd have to cross the room to get it. The rattling stopped abruptly, and I heard nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Gathering my courage, I crept toward the bed, keeping one eye on the door. My fingers fumbled for the phone, finally grabbing it and dialing 911. The operator's calm voice answered after what felt like an eternity. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered as quietly as I could. Someone's in my house. They're outside my bedroom door. The operator stayed calm, asking me questions about my location and the situation. I tried to answer, but my attention was split. Every creak, every shift of the air made me flinch. Gracie stood beside me, her body still tense, her ears flicking at every sound. A shocking discovery. Minutes dragged on as I waited for the police. The operator stayed on the line, assuring me that officers were en route, but it felt like an eternity. The doorknob didn't move again, but I could feel the presence on the other side. I wasn't imagining it. I knew someone was there. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the air changed. The oppressive silence lifted, replaced by the faint sound of retreating footsteps. Whoever had been there was leaving. They're leaving, I whispered to the operator. Stay where you are, she instructed. The officers are almost there. I stayed frozen in place, clutching Gracie's collar as we listened to the sound of doors opening and closing downstairs. When the sound of footsteps faded completely, I let out a shaky breath. Moments later, I saw the flash of red and blue lights through the bedroom window. I unlocked the door cautiously when the officers called out, announcing their arrival. They swept through the house, checking every room, every closet, every corner. When they finally returned to the bedroom, one of them held up a set of boot prints they'd found in the snow leading from the back door to the street. The lock on your back door was picked, one officer explained. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. It's a good thing you stayed upstairs and called us. Nothing was stolen. The intruder hadn't been looking for valuables. They'd come for me, unforgettable lesson. And in the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about that night. Gracie had saved me. If it hadn't been for her growling and barking, I might not have woken up in time to call for help. The thought of what could have happened if I'd opened that door still sends chills down my spine. I had a security system installed the very next day. Cameras, motion sensors, and stronger locks replaced the flimsy ones I'd relied on before. But no matter how secure my house feels now, I still sleep lightly, Gracie always by my side. Winter nights still hold a certain kind of stillness, but they no longer feel peaceful. The snow may muffle sounds, but it also hides things you don't want to find. Or worse, things that want to find you. Gracie's warning saved my life that night. I'll never take her instincts for granted again. And while the police never found the person who broke into my house, I've made sure they'll never find an easy way in again.